if it felt magical, if it felt intense, if it felt like finally someone who sees you, chooses you, and feels familiar in a way you cannot explain, this wasn't love. That was love bombing. And the reason it felt so powerful is because it wasn't meant to be sustainable. Today I want to explain what love bombing actually is from psychological perspective, why it feels so convincing, and why so many intelligent, emotionally aware women fell for it. And I want to be honest here. I fell for it myself, more times than I would like to admit. My ex was very skilled at love bombing, and every time it felt real, sincere, and deeply emotional. It wasn't until I understood what love bombing actually is that everything finally started to make sense. And even knowing that, I still fell for it. Because awareness doesn't always stop emotional conditioning. But this is not about blaming anyone, and it's not about exposing the person. This is about understanding the pattern. What love bombing actually is. In psychology, love bombing is not considered as passion, love, romance, or healthy attachment. It's a form of emotional acceleration. In relationships involving narcissistic traits, love bombing is often the first phase of idealization, when the person creates intense emotional closeness before the real trust, safety, or time has been established. And I want to add something personal here because this is important. In my case, the love bombing started the very first date. I remember walking away and thinking, finally, I met my soulmate. The connection felt instant, familiar, almost unreal. And now, here I am making educational videos about this pattern. The irony. Because love bombing doesn't always look dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it feels like alignment, like destiny, like recognition. But psychologically, it's still emotional acceleration. Closeness is created before the reality can catch up. This intensity is not accidental. It serves a purpose to fast track attachment, to create emotional dependency, to bypass discernment. Instead of letting intimacy develop gradually, love bombing overwhelms the nervous system. Psychologically, that creates bonding without grounding. You don't actually know the person yet, but your body and emotions feel already attached. Why it feels so real? Love bombing feels real because it activates the same neurochemicals as genuine bonding, sometimes even more intensely. Here's what's happening internally. Dopamine spikes due to constant attention, novelty, and validation. Oxytocin increases due to emotional disclosure and perceived closeness. Attachment systems activate rapidly due to perceived safety and connection. The brain doesn't distinguish between earned intimacy and manufactured intimacy. Your nervous system simply responds to consistency, attention, and emotional availability. That's why people often say, I've never felt this way before. Because neurologically, the stimulation is intense. But intensity is not intimacy. And speed replaces safety. How love bombing shows up in real life. Love bombing doesn't always look extreme or obvious. In fact, it often looks thoughtful, romantic, and emotionally intelligent. Common signs include constant communication very early on, excessive compliments or idealization, mirroring your values, dreams, and wounds. Statements like, I've never connected like this before, you're different, I feel like I've known you forever. Fast emotional commitment, talking about the future before the present is stable. What's important here is not the behavior alone, but the timing. Healthy relationships build closeness alongside trust, boundaries, and reality. Love bombing builds closeness instead of those things. And here is a real example. On the very first date, my ex told me that we were meant to be together, like it felt like destiny. Very early on, he was talking already about the marriage, future, about kids, about our life together. Basically, he was saying everything I wanted to hear. We appeared to share the same values, the same dreams, and the same vision for the future. So, of course, it felt real. But psychologically, this is how love bombing works. It lies with your desires before it grounded in lived consistency. Mirroring and false intimacy. One of the most powerful elements in love bombing is mirroring. This is when someone unconsciously or strategically reflects your values, interests, emotional wounds, communication styles. It creates illusion of deep compatibility. Psychologically, it feels like being deeply understood. But real intimacy includes differences. It includes boundaries. It includes time. False intimacy feels intense because it collapses distance too quickly. You're not bonding through shared experiences over time. You're bonding through emotional exposure without safety. And this is where I can recognize my own role in this dynamic. I tend to be very open. I talk easily about things I love, what I'm passionate about, my future plans, and my values, because I personally would never use that information against someone. But in relationship involving narcissistic traits, that openness can be mirrored very quickly. What feels like being very deeply understood can be your own openness reflected back. And that's why it can feel like soulmate connection. Not because intimacy exists, but because connection was accelerated. Why it feels safe, but it's not. Love bombing often feels safe because it removes uncertainty. There is no guessing, no ambiguity, no emotional distance. The other person is present, affirming, and invested immediately. For many people, especially those with empathy, openness, or relational depth, this feels relieving. But psychologically, safety is not the absence of uncertainty. Safety is consistency over time. Love bombing creates certainty without evidence. That's why crush later feels so destabilizing. Why smart, self aware women fall for it. This is important. Falling for love bombing is not the sign of weakness. It's often sign of emotional intelligence, capacity for connection, belief in love, openness, and empathy. People with narcissistic traits, they don't target weak people. They target people who can bond deeply. From the outside, people often say, "You trusted too fast. You should have been more careful." But trust itself is not the problem. If we didn't trust at all, we wouldn't be able to form relationships in the first place. The issue is not trust. The issue is when trust is manipulated by people who enter a relationship strategically. If you are empathetic, emotionally intelligent, and open, love bombing feels genuine because it's designed to. Not because you missed a red flag, but because someone was actively creating illusion of safety. The subtle shift. Once attachment forms, something quietly changes. The intensity doesn't disappear. In fact, often it stays the same. But the follow through begins to fade. Words continue, promises grow bigger, the future sounds more detailed. Yet the present starts to feel thinner. And this is where emotional experience shifts from excitement to unease, from certainty to quiet confusion. You are still invested, still hopeful, but now you are carrying questions you didn't have before. This is a moment many people try to explain away because nothing is overly wrong, but something no longer aligns. This is where the next phase begins. And this is what later people come to recognize as future faking. When the future is used to maintain attachment, when reality slowly stops keeping up. If this resonates, it doesn't mean you were naive. It means you were emotionally open in a dynamic that exploited speed instead of safety. And understanding this is not weakness, it's clarity. If you've been through something like this, comment below what moment meant you realize that this was not genuine connection but love bombing. Your experience might help someone understand what they're feeling right now. And if you want to continue this conversation, subscribe and turn on notifications. I share new videos here at least once a week.